In terms of the speaker, I did want to then take the time to briefly introduce Dr. Debbie Austin from Portland Community College. Dr. Austin has an extreme passion for online teaching and learning and has been working in online higher education at Portland Community College for more than 15 years after a 20-year career honing her strategic leadership and project management skills through information technology, organizational and project leadership, and strategic planning efforts within Fortune 100 companies. You should do a webinar on that. That sounds fascinating. Debbie has done a lot of work in the past several years incorporating the use of AI for curriculum development and organizational efficiency, designing assessment and student training for utilizing AI, and designing a better pedagogical approach to assessment design for AI resistance. We need to make you our best friend, Debbie. You bring many tools to this conversation. And with that, I'll hand the reins of our wonderful Zoom virtual learning environment over to Debbie, but do want to recognize that Debbie is an active member of the Instructional Technology Council Affinity Work Group. She was talking about this very session at the last meeting, which is how she wound up being invited. So really appreciate all of your contributions to that effort as well. Without further ado, Dr. Austin.
Thank you, Fred. And I am so happy to be here. Anytime anyone asks me to speak on AI, I am like, absolutely. It is my passion right now. As you heard, my background is in technology. So because I'm a technologist, I'm naturally curious about technology, and I usually dive in with both feet when we're looking at technological innovation. So we're going to talk about AI proofing our assignments to think about how do we design learning environments for our students in this new age of generative AI. We have seen massive changes that changes every week. So what we need to do is stay on top of it, whether we agree with the use of AI in our courses or whether we want nothing to do with AI. We know that students are using AI. So you can't just bury your head in the sand and assume that nothing's going to happen. You have to be very diligent and understand what students are doing and where they're coming from. So we're going to touch a little bit on some of those kinds of things. As stated, I'm a faculty mentor at PCC, which means I train faculty, and I also am part of some AI initiatives at PCC. One of them being a grant money that I received several years ago to develop an assessment using AI for my students to use AI. So in that assessment, I learned a lot about where students are in their understanding of AI. And I realized through that process that students need to be taught how to use AI ethically. Most of them are not using AI to cheat on purpose. They're using AI because they don't understand. They don't understand the context of the content that we're asking them to research. They don't know where to start because maybe they come from a background with no background in what we're talking about. So they kind of don't know how to approach it, where other students do. So in the process of using AI, I think it elevates every student to the same starting point. So it's been an interesting process for me, and I've learned a lot. Along the way, I have developed a training module for students that at the end of this presentation, and I'm going to put this presentation link in the chat, by the way, so you can also access this document, because there's a couple links in here. One links to some examples that I'm talking about, and one links to a module that I've created. I don't know what LMS you're using. The module that I've created is it's in D2L. So this is the training module that I have, and it just takes students through this process. It's like a 1 hour at max, probably. It says 2 hours here, but it doesn't take students long to go through, excuse me, long to go through this, but it does give them some good things to think about as they approach the use of AI. So that's just a side thing. So getting into our presentation, our challenge today is the innovation in AI is rapidly advancing. So every week there's new stuff hitting the market, and there are new ways of approaching AI or using AI. And so we have to, as faculty, keep up with that and try to figure out how do we navigate this. I for one, do not want to be the AI police, and the detection tools are terrible, especially now that those same detection tools do humanize, will have a humanized agent that will humanize assignments. So it's harder to detect. And so it's just, and it's not a place I want to start with my students. I don't want to start with them on the offensive or defensive. I want to help them. I want to help them understand how to use AI and when to use AI. But more importantly, I think I can change my pedagogical approach to learning and teaching so that we're less likely to use AI. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So rather than solely focusing on detecting the work, exploring how to create assignments that leverage unique human cognitive strengths and get away from the AI strengths. AI has very few strengths, but it does do papers really well, that are very structured and very formal. So the challenge is that AI is rapidly reshaping how students approach assignments. And I know there's a couple of uh, quotes here, a couple of statistics. I'm pretty sure these are probably at least a year old, so the numbers are probably very low in comparison to where we are right now with students. But according to University Business Magazine, nearly a quarter of students are using AI to do their assignments for them. That's a really disturbing number. Do their assignments for them, not assist them. So we'll talk about the difference. More than a third of higher ed and K-12 students use AI to brainstorm and start assignments, which is how we want them to use AI, but we need to teach them how to use it appropriately. Because what I'm finding, and you're probably seeing this as well, is that students will use things like Grammarly or other tools that have AI components to them to help them improve their writing. But what happens is AI tends to rewrite for them. So then they lose their voice in that process, and we don't want that to happen. So our outcomes here are to identify what our vulnerable assignments are. So recognizing the characteristics of those assignments is going to be key to figuring out how to change them and how to adapt. And then develop a process-based strategy. So integrating process-based learning and iterative feedback loops helps promote authentic student work. It also helps me know where my students are in their learning process. If I'm only grading the end result of an assessment, so the output or the paper or whatever I'm having them do, if that's all I'm grading, in today's world, that's not going to be enough because it might be very heavily AI generated or very heavily AI assisted. And then I don't know where my student is. I don't know what they're learning. I don't know what they're missing. And I can't give them really good feedback. So if I develop a process-based strategy where I'm assessing their process of learning along the way, it helps me know that students are keeping up with what we're learning and they're actually absorbing what I want them to absorb. Evaluating alternative assessments, so exploring methods such as artifact creation and oral reflections and scaffolded submissions to reduce effectiveness of generic AI responses. AI does really good at some generic responses, but if you want to go deeper, AI is not really good at that. We'll talk about this artifact creation process. And then create an action plan. So develop a plan to pilot at least one AI resistant assignment as kind of an experiment if you haven't already done it. So our challenge is that AI tools are becoming more accessible and sophisticated. So even, like I said, the detection tools, a student can put their content, their AI generated content, into an AI detection tool and say, humanize this content. And AI detection tool will humanize it for them so that when I put their content into the detection tool, it reads as maybe this is AI, most likely not. It's kind of wishy-washy and it's not really clear. So very sophisticated tools if students really want to cheat. So the best way to avoid that is to force them into critical thinking processes that AI cannot produce for them. So it's just rethinking traditional assessments and our traditional methods of teaching and learning. This is a hard thing to do because most of us have been teaching for a really long time, and we've done things this way forever. This pedagogy works. You give them content, you teach them content, and then you assess based on a project or an output, usually a paper. That is no longer sufficient. Now we need to think about how do we get inside their heads to know what they're learning and what they know. So AI can enhance learning when used ethically, but it also presents challenges for us in evaluating their genuine understanding. And it doesn't necessarily mean AI proofing doesn't necessarily mean banning AI. It means designing assessments that emphasize original thinking. And we'll talk about some details there. So what is AI proofing? So we want original thinking from students. So if we think about that, asking them to have a more personal connection and creative application of the concepts, we can get into that deeper level of learning for the students. So our goal is to promote academic integrity while we foster that deeper learning engagement with the student. The approach is to design for human strengths rather than simply trying to detect AI use. And our outcome is to create assignments where AI becomes a potential learning aid rather than a substitute for their thinking. As I have been looking at my assessments and redesigning my assessments, what I'm realizing is this is a better process for my students. This is far better from a pedagogical standpoint for their learning process, and it creates greater engagement. And I'm finding that students want to engage more. It's more fun to engage with something that's more creative or more personal or has a more personal connection, or it's a puzzle for them to solve versus a research paper for them to write. We want them to learn to write research papers, but we also want them to apply the knowledge. So it's a great way to think about how do we get them to do that in some creative ways. So what are some of those techniques? So requiring personal artifacts. So asking students to submit their drafts, their notes, their outlines, or even journals showing their development over time. One of the things that I did with my AI assignment is ask students that it was a 4-part assignment with 4 separate submissions. So I took them through the process of finding an approach to a big topic. So a big topic like ERP, CRM, big technological innovations, and using AI to come up with some ideas. So brainstorming, what are some approaches, 3 different approaches that I could take in tackling this topic. Then they have to submit that and they have to write a reflection. So in a sense, it's a little journal that they write each time that shows me what they're learning, what surprised them about what they're learning. And what's interesting is in this process, when they get to the point where they ask AI to produce resources for them, and then they have to go vet the resources, this is where the aha moment comes in for students because they realize that there are very big limitations to AI, and some of them are actually quite detrimental to their learning process. They're finding that over half, literally over half of the resources that AI produces aren't valid resources. Some of them are completely made up. Some of them only exist of the abstract that's posted for free, but everything else is behind a paywall. If students can't get behind the paywall, neither can AI. So that resource isn't valid in that research process. So it's been an interesting process of discovery for students. And I love that. I love that reflection that they do at the end of each piece of the project. So incorporating multimodal projects, so creating videos, podcasts, infographics, presentations, portfolios, things like that that require an individual voice. AI just cannot do that well. I mean, I've seen infographics that AI tries to produce, and they're very flat, they're not deep, they're not very comprehensive, and they often have things that don't at all pertain to what the topic is. So having them do these kinds of things, not only do students seem to want to engage more with this kind of stuff because it's relevant and it's current, but it actually gets them more deeply into their materials and their topics, and they have to truly understand to do this. And then using reflective prompts like, what challenged you most about this task, or how would you improve your process next time? This helps you see, me, the instructor, see what they're actually reading or what they're learning or what they're not reading or learning. I like the multi-step process so that I can understand that students are actually going through the materials. They're actually doing the work I've asked them to do. I teach mostly online only, and that's really hard to do if you just hand them assignments and get their results back. So this helps me with that and helps me know where they are in that process. So we can ask them to connect to their own lived experiences. So something that's in their community, their identity, or real world observations. If you have in-class components, so if you have a Zoom class or you have an in-person class, you can do some in-class things like writing or discussions. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then assigning collaborative projects. So things where you have group and work and peer feedback. It helps with accountability. Students are less likely to just submit something that's AI created if they're working in a peer group, and the peers will hold them accountable. I've actually experienced that in one of my classes. So some more advanced strategies, including low stakes, frequent assessments. So track the learning progression over time to build a more complete picture of what your student is learning. This is probably the biggest takeaway that I've had in my learning process here, is to track that process of learning, not just the output. If you have some in-person components, you can do role play scenarios. One of the things that I like to do is use concept maps and diagrams. I've had a lot of questions about what is a concept map or a diagram. So something like a Venn diagram, a mind map. I'm a business instructor, so my examples are pretty business focused, but you probably have some other ideas about what that might look like for you. But in one of my marketing classes, for example, I have them map a customer experience, their customer journey of a purchase experience. So the emotions and the journey throughout the process and where the decision point comes in. So I used to have them write about that. Now I have them map it out, and students get far more engaged. The detail is much more vivid than when they write about it. So they seem to like this. In this presentation, there's a link here to some examples of concept maps and diagrams, just stuff that I pulled off the internet if you're looking for some ideas. And then finally on this slide, required justification. So asking them, why did you choose this example? Or how does this align with the reading or class discussion? This one I'm experimenting with in my business communication class this term, asking them to connect that concept for the week with the stuff that we're going through. So either the TED Talk, the reading, the textbook, ask them to kind of connect the dots for me. This shows me that they're actually going through the content and they've done the work and they understand it. So again, it's just helping me as an instructor know where the student is and how to work with them. So here's an example, a case study, a traditional versus AI resistant assignment. So a traditional assignment might say, write a 5-page essay analyzing the themes in Shakespeare's Hamlet. Okay, so this is something AI can easily generate. It's a straightforward prompt. AI has lots of data about this. There's no personal connection required. It's a single submission with no artifacts, and it's in a standard format with a predictable structure. This is where AI excels. And this is how usually we can spot AI use pretty quickly, because if you see something that's formatted in this beautiful, paragraph form with bullet points and headers and conclusion, a lot of our community college students don't write like that, and they certainly don't produce like discussion responses like that. So when I see something that's too perfect, I then take a closer look and kind of reach out to the student. So an AI resistant version of this same assignment might be to create a multimedia analysis connecting the theme in Hamlet to a current event in your community. That's a much different approach. And that's an application-based approach, which is actually better for the student, for you to see if the student is grasping the concepts. Um, you can ask them to submit an outline, a draft, and a final version, kind of helps you follow their process. Include a 3-minute video explaining the process. I'm doing this a lot more where students can produce something with AI, but if they have to produce a video explaining the process and explaining what that was produced, this is where they get caught up oftentimes and they have to go back and learn it. So I'm okay with them using AI at this point because they still have to learn it in order to produce a video to tell me about it. Otherwise, I can spot, something that's not genuinely from them very quickly in this video. And by the way, chatbots can be in your classroom actually taking a course from you. I've had that experience before, and they're producing strictly AI stuff. So if you're asking for video content, if you're using other tools like Anoto or Hypotheses, I don't know if you're exposed to those, but Anoto is a video note tool. Hypotheses is a document note tool. AI can't do those things. AI can't get in there. VoiceThread is another one. AI can't do that. AI can't create a video of the student. So these are really great tools to ensure that your students are authentic and real students too. You could also ask them to incorporate a personal reflection on how the theme relates to their own experience and or present to peers for feedback. So just some ideas on how a traditional assignment might be changed. So discussions is where I'm seeing a huge problem right now, as probably are all of you, where students, it's just easy for them to take the discussion prompt, pop it into an AI chat, and then post their response back to the discussion board. So I've been rethinking and revising all of my discussions to make them more AI proof. So here are some techniques. You can ask for a lived experience. So like describe a time in your life when you experienced a communication breakdown. How would concepts from this week's reading have changed that outcome? This is an actual discussion in my communications course. AI can't replicate a personal experience convincingly. That it can try, but usually there's like marks with insert something here in the context of the text. So it's easy to spot if they're using AI to generate something that requires personal experience. Require an application to local issues is another way you can do this. So how could this week's economic theory, for example, be applied to a business or community near where you live? So localized contexts require actual knowledge beyond generic summaries that AI usually produces. So if you're going to write about something in the community, that usually requires some local knowledge, and you'll be able to see that students are actually grasping the concepts. Using metacognitive prompts, this is the one that I really love. So asking a question like, what idea from this week's module challenged your thinking the most, and how has your perspective shifted? It forces introspection and original thought. And I think students like engaging with this. This is kind of like the puzzle piece, solving a challenge. So what challenged your thinking? I teach technology. So one of the things that um, this is a common aspect in my courses where students often say, I didn't know this. I didn't realize this. I didn't understand. Like one of the things we talk about is personal privacy on the internet and things like that. And students come back and say, wow, I learned a lot. So this is the kind of prompt that helps them really reflect on what surprised them this week. Include a peer reaction. So examples, respond to a peer whose experience differs from yours, and how does their viewpoint expand or challenge your own? I like this because it helps them examine their own biases. It gets them to reflect more. And AI can't adapt to peer-generated content. So I think it helps students, but it helps us too to see, again, what they're learning. So focus on judgment. So example, if you were a project manager facing the situation described in the case study, what would you prioritize and why? It requires synthesis and value-based reasoning. AI has a hard time with this. So especially if you're teaching, in this case, a project management concepts, um, you would like to know what they would do differently or how they're thinking about this process. This is a way to get to that. You could also reference class discussions. So refer to something mentioned in this week's Zoom discussion or the online discussion board. How did it affect your understanding of the topic? AI can't access live real-time classroom moments, and it has a hard time with some of these other aspects of this one. So affecting how did it affect your understanding of the topic is a good question for students. So another example here is if you can include a multi-step discussion prompt. So for example, a traditional discussion prompt might be discuss the causes of the French Revolution. Well, this is super easy for AI to generate. It has all the information it needs, and it's just reciting facts, and it can format things really beautifully. So AI handles that really well. But if you say, first, summarize the main causes of the French Revolution in your own words, then connect one cause to a current social issue in our country, and then pose a question for your peers to explore. This becomes more complex, harder for AI to achieve, and more engaging for students, honestly. If you're asking them to connect it to a current social issue or something going on in our country, I think students can connect with that. And it also helps answer the question of why am I learning this? Why do I need to know this? So it helps us really apply things in a way that helps students gain those aha moments that we love to see. So it's also harder to automate and easier for us as instructors to spot inconsistencies between these steps. So if you've got this disjointed approach from a student, that's a first clue that maybe they're not doing all of the work themselves. So I think as I've been talking about this, our benefits beyond AI proofing are that it increases engagement. So students connect much more deeply with material that requires a personal investment. And frankly, I think they enjoy that more. Students like to be personally invested in their learning process if they're really here to learn. And this gives us an opportunity to help them do that. It also gives them transferable skills. So if you're talking about a process-focused assignment, it builds real-world competencies beyond what we're talking about in this course. It gives them this learning process about how to process through dense, heavy information that, when they get on the job, they might be asked to do this. So now we're giving them a step-by-step approach to doing that. So it builds skills beyond content. Um, I think it also provides greater equity. So diverse assessment types allow different strengths to come out in our students. And we want to see that. I have always tried to diversify my assessments, even giving alternatives. You can do it this way or you can do it this way. And I think that gives students the opportunity to really dig in. And if you give them an opportunity to do something that they're really good at, like being creative and creating an infographic, they're going to be more apt to want to do that because they're good at it and they love it. Usually we like doing what we're good at. And then I do think authentic tasks mirror the complex collaborative nature of our professional environment. So it really prepares students for the work world beyond just learning content in an academic way. Okay, so what are our challenges? It might increase our grading time for complex assignments. Yes, that is true. It does. We're requiring more engagement from students and it requires more engagement from us. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but we can streamline some of these processes so that some things may be self-graded um, or they get credit for completing something, not necessarily like if it's a journal assignment, not necessarily a grade, but they just get credit for completing it. You can go in and read that stuff, but maybe you don't have to grade it. Um, Student resistance to unfamiliar formats. I mean, if they're familiar with this process of writing a paper each week for the next 12 weeks, they might go, whoa, what's happening here? You're asking me to do all this other stuff and learn some new technology. And, so they might resist to some of that. In my courses where I have an AI assignment, I give an alternate to students. They can complete the assignment without the use of AI. I think it's important for us to consider that there might be some ethical concerns from students and they may object to using AI. I get that and I understand it and they're valid. So if they don't want to use AI, they can opt out of using AI. I try to tell them why they might want to learn at least, but I'm very much open to them submitting something in an alternate format. Another obstacle is a need for very clear rubrics and expectations and very clear instructions. What I do here is I use AI to help me with this. So I will take my assignment instructions. I know I tend to write very academically. So it's very formal. And for community college students, that's not always the best for their understanding. So I get some help from AI. I upload it and I say, soften my tone, point out where I have some holes in my instructions and where things are maybe not entirely clear. So I can improve those instructions, and that has worked well. I also I like 4x4 rubrics, so I don't think creating these really long rubrics for students is really great for them because most of them won't read it. It just looks overwhelming and way too much. So I do this 4x4 rubric approach. So I give AI my assignment and I say, create a 4x4 rubric on a 50-point scale or whatever points I have for this assignment. And AI will create those rubrics for me. Very quick, very easy to do. All I have to do is go in and make some tweaks where I don't like the wording or something doesn't seem right. But that saves a ton of time. I also use AI, by the way, to write my case studies. So like if I'm teaching a project management class, for example, I'll have AI write a case study that meets these objective criteria so that students will learn what I want them to learn. It's amazing. I have written case studies, lots of case studies, and usually they take approximately 6 to 8 hours to write one. AI does it in 5 minutes. So definite improvement there. And then there are accessibility concerns for sure, especially with some of the AI tools. But I will share just one quick story here. I had a couple of terms ago, I had a student with an accommodation, and she was taking my class for the second time because she failed the first time because she just couldn't stay on top of her assignments and she couldn't get everything in on time, no matter how much we worked together. And so going through this, she learned how to use AI. She told me, I have never heard of AI, all these tools before, and I've never used it before. And so you taught me how to use it. And now I'm using it. It's changed my life. I'm using it for my organization and to stay on task. And she has to ride public transportation. And so she uploads the public transportation schedule. She uploads her school schedule. She uploads her assignment schedules, everything she puts in there, and AI gives her a weekly calendar with tasks by each day, the things that she needs to get done in order to meet all of her goals for the week, and what time she needs to be where, and how she's going to get to her next class, and how she's going to log on for her remote class, all those things. AI gives her all these reminders, and she said, it has changed my life. It has reorganized me, kept me on task, and helped me with time management. So there's other things to consider here that are some pretty compelling stories for using AI for efficiency. So some mitigation strategies might be to start small, like you take one redesign assignment, even a small assignment, and then pilot that, use peer review to distribute feedback in the load, provide examples and scaffolding, offer multiple format options when possible, and then document your improved learning outcomes. And I get a lot of feedback from my students. I still ask my students every term on my AI assignment, my big AI assignment, what their feedback is, and it helps me improve it every single term. I find their feedback is just amazing, and it's like gold to an instructor. So how do we get started? Because this seems like a big task and it seems like a lot of work, and it is. But we can't do it all at the same time. So analyze your current assignments and identify which ones you think are most vulnerable to AI generated responses. And then take one assignment and apply 2 to 3 AI resistant techniques to transform a single assignment as a pilot for you to test out. And then as you're testing it, communicate. Make sure you're very transparent and communicate with students, explaining the purpose behind the new design and how it benefits their learning. And then continue to evaluate and refine, gather feedback and assess effectiveness before you expand this to other assignments. That is super important. Hearing from your students, hearing what your students are experiencing. I didn't understand because for me, using AI, there was no learning curve. I'm a technologist, so it was just super easy for me. But it isn't that way for everyone. For a lot of people, there is a learning curve, and there is definitely for students a learning curve in identifying what you can do and what you can't do with AI. So, like for if they're using Grammarly to assess their writing and to improve their writing, a lot of times what happens is Grammarly now has AI features. They can turn those off, but they have AI features, and then it tends to want to rewrite the student's work, and in the process, the student loses their own voice. So, what we want students to understand is what is really happening here. Because when you lose your voice in it, then this looks like an AI piece of work. You may have done the research, but it's not your writing and it's not your voice. So it's important that students still can understand that and retain their voice. So continuing to work on that as we go. So how do we get started? This is just a slide here for a suggestion. You can take an existing assignment, identify what's most which is your most susceptible assignment and what makes it vulnerable. Asking yourself these questions. How might a redesign improve learning, not just prevent the use of AI? What challenges might the students face with this new format, and how could you provide support for the process? I think that last bullet point is a super important one to remember, that our students are going to need support. They need to be trained, they need support from you, and they need support that's non-judgmental. So what I'm finding is, my approach to students who I know are using AI is not one of accusation. It is one of, tell me what happened here. It looks like there might be some AI use here, and I just want to make sure that you're using the tools correctly. And I'm here to help you with that. So it's an approach that helps students kind of open up and talk to you and tell you maybe why they use AI in the first place. I've met with students before and they're like, well, I just didn't know what to write. So I just used AI. And so we talk about how you overcome that writer's block, and maybe you can use AI as an aid to help you get started, but not to write. So it's a much better approach, and it's great for students too. I get a lot more students that are open to talking about it with me, which is what I want. So here's just an action plan. If you're interested, you could identify one course for pilot implementation before next term and select an assignment to redesign, and then create new rubrics and support materials. I think that's one of the reasons I created that AI training module. I didn't have that in the beginning, and I found that students really need more information. I was telling students over and over the same things, and things like, when you let AI do the work for you, you're robbing yourself of your own education. You're limiting what I can do to help you as an instructor. I'm here to help you learn. But if you're not giving me your work, if I can't see what you know or what you can do, I can't help you. I'm completely useless to you. So um, understanding that they need to be trained. So that's why I developed that little training module. And I've had actually positive feedback from students about that module, that they say, this is informational. I appreciated it. I know more now where the lines are that I shouldn't cross and where I might be able to. But I'm also really clear that this is one instructor's opinion. So check with your other instructors, because not everybody sees this the same way. Here at PCC, we've started including syllabus language, and for each program has a different expectation um, for our students, and so we have different programs have different syllabus language. We develop syllabus language for the business programs, one for faculty that don't want to use AI at all, and one for faculty that are allowing some AI use. And then there's more detail if faculty want to put more detail in the syllabus. So then the first week of the term, you introduce your policy to students, explain the redesign assignment and rationale, and provide examples of expected work. We all know that students love to see examples, and it's kind of sometimes hard for them to envision what you want if there's not a concrete example. Then midterm, gather some initial feedback and make adjustments and document early observations. And then again, at the end of the term, evaluate the effectiveness and plan for your expansion. And here's an important piece. Share what you're doing with your colleagues. I'm finding that the conversations we're having around the use of AI and around AI proofing our assignments, they're so valuable. I went to Northwest eLearn last week in Eugene, and there all of the sessions, just about every single one of them was on AI of in some way, shape, or form. Everybody is having this conversation. Everybody is dealing with the same things. So the more we can share and collaborate with our colleagues and share ideas, the better off we're all going to be, because I learn a lot of my ideas from my colleagues. So, those conversations are super important ones. So our key takeaways here, we want to focus on the process. So design assignments that value the journey of learning, not just the final product. Embrace personalization, create opportunities for students to connect to their unique contexts and experiences, and then diversify. Use multiple formats to create more complete picture of what your students are learning and what their abilities are. So not only can we address some of the challenges that we're having in this way, but I think we're creating much more meaningful experiences for our students, which is the exciting part for me. I think students are embracing kind of this updated type of learning and the updated process that we're going through. So here's the question. Just curious, do you think AI proofing is a temporary thing and that we will shift toward AI integrated assignment design over time? Also, the AI training module in D2L, is this something you would be able to check? Yes. So at the last page of this presentation, there's a link to that, to a document that has a link to the module. So I don't know if you're using D2L or Canvas.
Canvas.
Okay. So what I will do is make a package for Canvas, and Fred, I'll give that to you. How about that? And then you can share that out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so yesterday in Dr. Anna Douglas's presentation, she was talking more about how to integrate AI into the classroom environment. It seems your strategies are somewhat resistant to AI in the classroom. Am I interpreting that properly? And if so, do you have concerns about students being less prepared to be engaging with AI in an ethical manner as they enter professional? Okay, so I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think by teaching them how to use AI ethically and what kinds of things AI is really good at helping with, and giving them the gotchas that AI has. So helping them understand where AI really doesn't do things well is super important. So I do think that prepares them for the real work world. And yes, these strategies here are for AI online mostly, but I think I've been working with K-12 faculty, and they don't have online facets, but they have students using AI to complete their projects. So I think it works for classroom as well. Maybe just a little bit different strategy or a slight different take on it, but I do think these can be applied across the board. Um, and Cheryl, to get to your other question, do you think we'll move to AI, different AI assessment design over time? Yes, I absolutely think that we're talking about AI proofing right now because it's really a new concept. And most of us are just trying to figure out, okay, what do I do about this? And how do I keep students from just creating content with AI and submitting that as their work? And I think this is the way to do it. But over time, I think this is going to shift the way we think about our pedagogical practice and shift our strategies, like permanently. I don't think we'll ever go back to the old ways of doing things.
I agree with you, by the
Yes,
way. Yeah.
thank you. Mhm.
So yeah, that's good timing on the questions because that was the end of my presentation. Um, I would like to see our library research librarians develop a module on the dangers of AI use for research and share with students. Yes, there are, and there's some components of that in my in my um, training module for students that tell them, you know, if you're going to overuse AI, you're not only going to this Harvard research was interesting because it says that not only do they not improve their critical thinking skills, they actually degrade their critical thinking skills by overusing AI. That's a pretty serious thing. And if students care about that or understand what that means to them, I think they're going to pay more attention. The link for the AI training manual does not work. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, Let me see here. And Benjamin, you have your hand raised.
Are we allowed to speak? I didn't know. It would take me
You
forever
can
too.
speak.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Just checking. Well, thank you very much. This was a wonderful presentation, and I love many of the things you did and the spirit of this presentation, but I also love that everything you discussed seems to me to be just really good pedagogical practice. Even in a world without AI, I would recommend all these things that you talked about as a really great way to enhance learning. But so kind of getting back to Cheryl's question, I think some of the other comments, I am curious, looking at your assignments, I very much see students not really benefiting from AI to complete those. And so I kind of wonder to what extent is there a role for AI? Because on the one hand, you talk about they need to be educated and understand AI, but a lot of your assignments don't really incorporate or don't need AI. So I'm curious how you do that. And if there's not really a need for AI, I guess I would beg the question, why have a student use it at all in your class?
So I have them use AI so that they can get started. So as a tool, like a learning aid assistant. So if they need, so for example, in the one that I received a grant money for to develop, I have them do I give them a list of topics that we've covered in our course, like ERP, CRM, all the things. And they can choose one off there and then they put it into AI and they have to give it a prompt that says, give me 3 different approaches to this topic. And AI comes up with 3 different approaches. Every time I ask them to use AI, I ask them to revise their prompt and do it again. And they have to give me the results of everything so I can see their process. What that does for students who come in with this blank background, like business students, for example, some come with some understanding of business. They worked in it, their parents work in it, whatever. Other students don't. They come from blue collar background. They're maybe a first generation college student. They don't have any idea what we're talking about. And so they don't know how to get started because the context isn't personal to them. So AI elevates this for them by giving them some ideas on how they might approach a topic. And then they have to write on their own. They have to do their own research. And whatever AI gives them, they have to vet. So they have to go out and find those articles. They have to read those articles. They have to find articles on their own. And they have to do all the writing on their own. But it gives them a leg up to getting started and some ideas that they might not have thought of otherwise. Other questions?
Not looking like there are. I was going to, if I could, Debbie, I was going to respond to Ben too and saying that what I've seen here, maybe the guardrails that we've been thinking we need for helping students begin to understand that there are parameters to AI. And for me, it was perhaps like Ben's thinking, is how now what could I layer in terms of the kinds of exercises I want my students to do, taking advantage of some of the guardrails you've identified, but then that allows me to have a higher level of confidence of letting them use more of the AI. So that, because in many ways, even what you're identifying is important, I think, for faculty, because we need to understand the guardrails. We need to understand ways that this can be abused. We don't want to do trial and error. I think a lot of us are using professional development to try to fast track through this journey. And so I see a lot of application in what you've talked about. But I personally am looking to try to do AI every week. And then there is that issue of students, certainly assignments that can take advantage of any free, but then how do I deal with students that maybe don't think they need to learn anything about AI? Kind of hoping I don't have any, but it can happen. So that's something I have to figure out. Otherwise, Debbie, thank you so much. This is a very useful session. We appreciate it. And I would remind everybody that this will be available in a few weeks. And as she's indicated, she'll share with me the D2L link converted for Canvas. If you want to take a look at that, once we have it, we'll send an email out to those who attended and let you know. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support of the summit. And please let us know if you have any ideas or feedback so that we can continue to do these, but make them relevant for you.